Hey there folks, and welcome back to the second installment of the TF2 weapon swap. Last episode we covered primary weapons, and that did a lot better than I expected. Let's just go ahead and do a quick little review of what we're going to do before we do it. In this video, we're going to be looking at each of the 9 classes and discussing how much stronger they would be if you could swap out their secondary weapon for another class's secondary weapon, and which one would be the strongest for them. We won't be swapping out their primary weapons or their melee weapons, as I believe this will make for a much more interesting video, as you actually have to consider the combos that they'll have. This time we're going to be going slightly more in depth for some of these choices, as there's actually a bit more to debate over for each class. So without further ado, let's just jump into it with Scout. Much like nearly every other merc we're going to talk about in this video, Scout's not really defined by his secondaries. His scattergun and fast legs make him the man he is. So needless to say, there's going to be a lot of improvement he could get from this weapon swap, and he's got a lot of options. First, let's go over one of the most common options we'll see: stickies and shields. Both are fantastic. They're essentially another primary. While shields are a tad bit more gimmicky, they can still offer a solid bit of mobility and give you some helpful amount of defense. Scout in particular would really love the Charge and Tard's 50% fire damage resistance and 30% explosive resistance. This still does nothing against sentries or heavies, but we actually have something for that. This sticky bomb launcher is the quick and easy solution for not only sentries but practically everything else. Same as last video, I don't really need to say much about stickies. Each sticky deals a bunch of damage, can be spammed easily and detonated whenever you feel like it. And these are good and all, but there's one issue about stickies that exist. When the stickier dies, so do the stickies. Now, Demoman has no issue with this. He's got plenty of HP, decent movement speed, and are a pretty common target for medics, which means healing and overheal. But Scout? Even with overheal, he's only got 10 extra points of health over base Demoman. What I'm concerned about is that Scout might die way too quickly to actually use the stickies. And sure, I could be assuming the worst of my fellow Scout mains, but a second point I'd like to make is that the scatter gun is really freaking good. 105 damage for a meat shot is not to be underestimated, and the scatter gun fires off however many shots I just showed in this clip before you can detonate even one sticky. Not to mention that the sticky bomb launcher has absolutely no synergy with Scout's gameplay. Hang back and spam vaguely at the point or cart? Just go play Soldier or Demo if you want to do that. And to bring up a point I brought up last video about rocket launchers in Scout, the self-damage from this would just be way too much for Scout to handle. So despite talking about how good these are, and yeah, they wouldn't be bad, I have 2 other ideas. First of all, an idea that would greatly improve Scout's team support: Medic's Mediguns. This will also be a fairly common contender. There isn't really a downside to having a Medigun. My thought is that Scout could become sort of a perfect quick fix medic, healing up the team and then running back into some action, not focusing much on building Uber. At the same time, if you did want to build Uber, Scout would be really good at it. His double jump and speed would make it really easy to dodge incoming damage, his small frame could make great use of those meat shields you call teammates, and you can quickly run away to save your life when you're being threatened. Now for the second, or I guess third idea: double shotgun gaming. This time not even as a joke. I'm looking over at Soldier's secondaries, as you can also yoink his banners. Imagine a Scout with a fully active battalion's backup that he just charged up from killing all your snipers, rushing into the front lines to lead his team to clear the point. The other banners won't be doing as much. The buff banner will only come in handy if it's fully charged, and the regen from the conch isn't too important considering how quickly Scout can just pick up a health pack. Now, the effect from the conch giving you more speed would be pretty fun to see, and I can see myself using it a lot. But the real reason I choose this is for the shotguns. Scout already excels at burst damage, dealing some of the highest single target damage in the entire game. But how Valve balances that is by giving the scatterguns a pretty small mag size. Clip size? I don't know. The point is that it really sucks when I'm right about to kill an enemy but they scuttle away as I'm reloading. But with a second shotgun, well, I can just switch to that and finish them off. Now Scout can go from killing a max of 3 enemies per rotation to, I don't know, like 5. So like half the enemy team will now fall to a good Scout rotation. Sure, this means that you're gonna have to reload 2 whole guns before you do a rotation, but I'm pretty sold on this swap, even if Medigun is a close second place. On to Soldier now. Unlike Scout, losing his own secondaries hurts him a bit. With no gunboats to make rocket jumping safer and no banners for that team support or any, health regen, he's stripped away of some of his most helpful tools. So now we have to find something to replace that lost power with. I don't really think he's going to be gaining that much from a medigun, as he wants to keep spamming his rockets. And in other scenarios, he might be rocket jumped totally far away from his team, so now the medigun is entirely useless. And while stickies are always a great choice, both giving him an easier way to deal with air blast and giving him access to shields, I believe that there's another option that just barely beats those out. Sniper's secondaries, simply for the Girardi, which would combo extremely well with Soldier's rockets and his common frontline presence. We all know how powerful Girardi is. Applying mini-crits to enemies usually comes with a pretty significant cost. But Girardi is balanced by the fact that Sniper uses it. A sniper running to the front lines to toss his urine into the mix is likely to just get two-shot before he can even throw it. Or at least throw it effectively. But if it was Soldier doing it, a frontliner with lots of HP, he can swiftly turn the tide of combat in his favor whenever it's ready. No need to build up a buff banner, all you need is a big glass of water before the match. And yeah, sure, you could also use the SMGs. They're not like a bad option, it's some pretty consistent damage with a high fire rate, but let's face it, being able to open up any push or team fight with mini-crits is just the winning option here. Pyro's up now, and they can get a lot from a secondary swap. Flare guns are a fun and engaging way to play Pyro, sure, but there's a lot of other more powerful options we have at our disposal here. There's the banners for the various banner effects and passives. There's Mad Milk for free heals against groups of enemies. There's Girardi for free mini-crits, and then there's one pretty clear winner. Demoman secondaries. As I've said before, and you're gonna hear me say again, these are basically another primary. Stickies can allow Pyro to destroy sentry nests with ease, which is usually a pretty hard counter to them without a medic. It also gives Pyro some very quick mobility with sticky jumping, allowing for easy flanking and, head-on flanking, I guess. Flamethrowers are really good. You could even store away your flamethrower until they're up in your face and just spam stickies as a faster Demoman with afterburn immunity. But if you really can't stand being separated from your flamey companion, you could also just switch the shields. Besides the defensive benefits that this close combat class needs, the charging mechanic is really good for Pyro, so good in fact that it might even beat out stickies. Being able to rush down any retreating or unaware enemy and cover them in flames would remove one of the biggest weaknesses Pyro has, which is their weapon's reach. Flamethrowers are basically close combat weapons. But with a shield, now Pyro can force nearly every battle into a close combat one, even if you were trying to keep your distance. The only downside I can see from this swap is that Pyro's gonna have to now choose between stickies or shields. There's, not a single weakness I can think this gives them. I mean, I guess it would make Pyro duels a little bit more difficult, but just pick up the power jack and crit him with it. It's not that hard. Now we've reached Demo. While he's out an eye in his other primary, he still has pipes and booties. The booties might not be too important, but 25 more HP is not to be overlooked. For example, you can give him the Medigun for a super healthy medic for relatively easy Uber building. Pick up the Eyelander and risk a melee fight here and there, and hey, now you're a super duper healthy medic with some quick legs to boot. Oh yeah, the Eyelander. That should probably be considered. Even without shields, getting kills with it won't be impossible. Just trap a scout in a small area or wait for free heads to come to you from spies. The point is, Demo might be losing a really good secondary, but he is far from useless. But even after considering all the different combos Demo gets, from Girardi to the Medigun to Mad Milk, my choice would be Soldier's secondaries. Banners and shotguns would do really well across all of Demo's playstyles. You could even give pipe jumping a try with the gunboats. Shotguns give them a safe and reliable way of dealing with all those up-close enemies, but the real power from this swap comes from the banners. Buff banner giving you and your team mini-crits is always good, the conch giving you speed and regen is great for your Eyelander times, and the battalion's backup gives you 20 more HP, as well as, the effect of the battalion's backup, which, needless to say, is pretty strong. You can even throw on the booties, the Islander, and the battalion's backup, collect some heads, and you can reach up to 255 health without overheal. You know, it's mainly just silly because you have no crits, but it would be funny to see. We'll just be moving on to heavy now. The big, beefy Russian man can finally ditch those puny shotguns, but saying goodbye to his beloved sandwich? Oof, that's gonna be a tough one. The sandwich and banana do a lot to cover for the constant damage heavy takes, so losing both of them is gonna hurt. At the same time, medics exist and they love their heavies, so it's not a total loss. A pretty obvious weapon swap I can think of off the top of my head would be the banners, since they can charge up pretty quickly thanks to the minigun's constant damage, but heavy really doesn't get too much from them outside of that. The HP regen from the conch is just not nearly enough, and the 20 extra HP that you get from the battalion's backup it means nothing on this already really beefy big Russian lad. Though it would mean that snipers couldn't one-shot you if you had overheal, I still don't think that it's enough to justify this being the weapon swap. Mediguns are also pretty useless here since he's so big that everyone will just mow him down before he can get any effective healing done. Girardi is also useless because you won't have the time to both switch to your minigun and rev it up before the recently peed on folks have either run away or gunned you down. You could potentially alleviate some of that focus fire that we've been talking about using NG's short circuit to slow down incoming rocket spam and disable sticky traps, but overall I think there's only really two choices here that would do exceptionally well. Demo secondaries and Pyro secondaries. I've already ranted enough about stickies and shields, so I'm just gonna make that one quick. Sticky jumping for mobility, sticky spam for great damage with heavy's high HP, and shields for increased tanking and the charge mechanic. This is a winner for sure. I don't think I can argue that Pyros would be better, but I think that they could end up being a bit more safe and a more entertaining option. First of all, Pyro's thermal thruster and detonator gives Heavy that mobility he so desperately desires. The thruster in particular could work really well because Heavy could just switch to his minigun mid-flight and keep that speed until he lands, becoming a surprise Heavy whenever the skybox allows it. Of course, you could also keep those trusty shotguns for some good burst damage, but now you have an actual counter to snipers with the flare gun. And the scorch shot, but only use that if there's a really good sniper or if your team's getting rolled. Regardless, flares are projectiles that have no damage fall off, meaning you finally have a long-range option. And you can ask any sniper main, dealing with the aim punch from being on fire is impossible. And I'm not saying that this would be exclusive to snipers. You could also just as easily fire it at the point or at the cart before you enter the fight, or if you're running away from the fight. So just to recap, stickies and shields win, but Pyro secondaries are a close second, and I believe could give Heavy some fun options whilst also making him a lot stronger. But now we move on to NG, and same as last video, NG already basically has 2 secondaries, so we can do a lot here. Sure, losing the Wrangler is rough for those turtle NGs, but for the rest of us though, this is gonna be fun. Pretty sure we can just start by kicking off the bad ones. Scout secondaries do nothing, Soldiers' banners will likely never build since the sentry does all the damage. Mediguns aren't a bad choice, but considering how NG likes to stay near his buildings and away from the front lines, I can't see it getting that much use, and obviously sappers are worthless on him. On to the good ones. Girardi can effectively deter all non-Uber pushes, Heavy's banana can heal you the full on the run, or it can give you a second shotgun, flare guns kill spies, and the thermal thruster gives him the ability to do a funny sentry and even funnier spots. But let's face it, giving him stickies would be the strongest option by a long shot. NG was already the most powerful point protector, and by giving him the second most powerful tool for that, I mean, like, do I really need to say more? Can you not simply just picture how impossible that would be to beat? Like, going up against one of those could be annoying at most, but dig up all those memories of pushing to the last point where 4 of the enemy players decide to panic swap to NG. Remember how the clock went from 9 minutes left to 30 seconds left, and your whole team just died on their 7th Uber push. Now imagine if they could do that and also set up sticky traps. You would never win another game of offense unless you could wrangle up 3 Uber medics and like the rest of the team to play as heavies or explosive classes. Like, my goodness, even imagining it is getting me bothered. We're moving on. On to medic and... oh boy. Remember last episode where I said Sniper's primary swap would be the saddest we see? Well, we've likely reached the second place contender in that category. A medic without his medigun is certainly not going to be doing much for his team. Sure, he can still Crusader crossbow people, but that's about the extent of his medical practice. So we have two different ways we could approach this weapon swap. Option number 1. Keep him with his class responsibilities and treat his Crusader's crossbow like his new medigun. So make him stick to the Crusader's crossbow almost all the time, and when he really needs to, whip out a different weapon to either protect himself or support the team. We can just quickly answer this first option, and it goes to Sniper secondaries. Girardi is insanely good, and if you're sticking with the team, tossing that out there before a push might just be as effective as an Uber with the right team. So we're just going to be moving on to the second approach, taking advantage of his HP regen and 150 base health to make him a greater offensive threat. This option would treat his Crusader's crossbow and medic as a whole as more of a, hey, you're basically at full HP now, I'm gonna go back to fragging. Now, to answer this option, focusing more on a battle medic playstyle, my eyes go towards Pyro's locker. Less so for the flare guns and more so for the shotguns. Considering what a good NG can do with the shotgun at base speed and 125 health, I can easily see a good medic go head to head with quite a few classes that would usually scare him off. Plus, the HP regen could keep you healthy and ready for the next fight and greatly reward you for strafing during combat. Now, as for which one is better for the medic, well, that's just gonna have to be up to you. Both are fairly good, but at different things. One will help the team by debuffing and healing them, and the other helps by killing and healing. I see myself leaning more towards the latter because I love my shotguns and I love my HP regen. But I think this is where my pretty clear bias clouds this decision, as the other choice is probably stronger. But now we move on to Sniper, finally reunited with his beloved, and he's back to having nearly no downsides, so oh boy, let's make Sniper even less fun to fight against. We can start just by kicking off some of the other options that he won't do well with. Scouts, drinks, and pistols won't do much, stickies are likely to kill you rather than the enemy, miniguns are fully worthless for the Sniper, and flare guns can kill spies, but so can many other weapons. Such as my number one choice, Soldiers secondaries. Not only do you get shotguns, which kill a spy, scout, or any other bother way faster than an SMG, but you also get banners. Conch's HP regen is pretty solid, and the battalion's backup giving Sniper 20 more HP would be great with a medic. More so than any of the passives that the banners can give you, the 480 damage to 600 damage requirements to charge them would be so easy with a rifle. So snipe from far away, then lead the charge with your team to win the point. Heck, you can actually use the Huntsman to make this even more effective. And now we move on to our final class, the Spy. So you might have noticed something before when I called Spy Sapper a secondary, and while technically in the loadout menu it's the knife that's in the second slot, we all know the real secondary is the Sapper. There's also another little funny quirk involving Sappers and Spy. You probably already know that he can use it while disguised, so what would that mean if he had a different secondary? Well, randomizer rule says that it breaks, implying that it's a Sapper-specific quirk, which does make sense, but come on, let's have a little bit of fun and come up with two different weapon swaps. One for a non-disguise breaking swap, and one for a disguise breaking swap. First up, the fun one. And let's not kid ourselves, the answer is obvious. Scout's Bonk Atomic Punch would... Nah, I'm kidding, it's stickies, it's always stickies. Like, why even bother with any cool sapper stabs when you could just plant 3 of these pointy fellas down and insta-wipe every sentry nest and the poor fools who took refuge nearby them? You could even sticky jump with the Dead Ringer to get some wacky backstabs, but why bother backstabbing if you could just sneak around the whole enemy team and flank them with bombas? Shields would be worthless, save the fire resistance, but I really don't think I need to say more. Like, come on, we're on the final class, and having given these to basically 5 of the 9 classes, including this one, I've kind of run out of things to say. So we'll be moving on to the more plausible swap, the disguise-breaking weapon swap. And yeah, stickies would still be a good option. Counterpoint, why are you bothering playing spies with stickies when you could just play demo with stickies? He's got more health, a better primary, and is still pretty mobile. So I'm going to suggest my real suggestion, which is Soldiers secondaries, I guess. I mean, yeah, stickies would still be stronger, but like, go play demo if you want stickies. Heavy's buffalo steak sandwich was also considered given the on-demand speed boost, but taking more damage is just not worth it. You'll die in the attempt of getting a backstab. But if you got a backstab off while equipping one of the banners, you'd end up filling it up by a lot. Backstabs deal 200% of the maximum HP of whoever you just stabbed, so it'll be pretty easy to fill up a full banner and then just run back to your team to pop it. And that's pretty helpful and all, but as usual, I'm looking at the passives that you get from the banners. 20 more HP would make using the kunai so much less painful. It would give you even more overheal when you actually land those backstabs. Big Earner would also just become a better stock knife with only a 5 HP drawback, and for us Cloak and Dagger fans, the conch would let us backstab as much as we want and retreat back into the shadows while our HP regens. I'm in a bad situation! Or you can just drop the banners and run a shotgun like a real merc. Drop the knife and use the ambi for long range and then switch to your shotgun to fight them off. And there we are. The end of all the classes and the end of episode 2. I went a lot more in depth this time around, as I feel like last video I didn't explain my choices well enough. I really just said, this one's the best, and I'm not going to explain why the other ones wouldn't work, and I feel like that was unfair. Another reason as to why I went so much more in depth is, well, these were just harder to figure out. Like, obviously, stickies and shields were going to dominate, but I quickly came to realize that just by giving a class stickies, it wouldn't make them a better pick than simply playing Demoman with stickies. It was way easier last video to just hand scout a flamethrower and watch him burn down the enemy way more effectively than a Pyro, but this time I could hardly see a spy using stickies nearly half as effectively as a Demoman would. On the flippity-dippity, I was surprised at just how often I ended up giving out soldier secondaries. If the mighty damage of a shotgun wasn't enough to make me consider it for most classes, banners usually pushed it over the edge. Unlike how stickies are best on demo and fellow beefcakes, banners could usually benefit every class effectively. More health is more health. You can't go wrong with that. HP regen is so underrated given how little small medpacks heal you, and I guess the buff banner exists. I know we're likely never going to see another full-sized update, but man, I really wish if they gave this thing some passives. One final note I'll make before closing out was the lack of Jarate used for this swap. I used to think that this was almost a no-brainer, to just give it around given how powerful it is, but the more and more I used it, I found the recharge timer and the inconsistency of its splash was a real letdown. That's likely a skill issue on my part. I usually rock the SMG, so I might just be bad at Jarate bending. That's gonna be all from me, folks. Same as last time, I'm aware that my word isn't gospel in this matter. Feel free to share your own ideas below. I enjoyed reading all of them, from the silly ideas to the serious ones to the, oh my goodness people, give Spy a break, he's not even that hard to take care of even without a flamethrower. But I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. We'll be going over melee weapons next, so until next time, have a good one.